Hello. It's been a while since I've done a video, but long and awaited, I have promised a tutorial on Anima Beyond Fantasy, specifically the next part of Key, the Dominus Exxet book, the Dominion of Key. Now, before I get started, this is a big book. This is going to be a long video, okay? So bear with me as we go through this. Now, I'm not going to go over things like advantages and stuff because they are not relevant. They are things that you can read and are very easy to understand. I'm going to go over everything else out of the book, though. So if you want to learn about the advantages, you better go get the book or look them up online or something. But there's a lot of mechanics in this book, both about Key and the rest of the game. So I'm going to start off with the rest of the game parts first, and then I'm going to work my way to Key. And the differences of Key in this book and Key in the core rulebook. I will note if there's something that's in this book that is not a thing in core rulebook. Understood? Perfect. I will also make sure to provide relevant examples so that we can, a good idea of what's going on. So, the first part of this book is a lot of fluff. I skipped past some of it because I went too far. Oops. But let's talk about some of the important fluff in the book. Specifically, a big topic in this book is Nemesis, or the use of Nemesis in particular. It is an alternative way to do key, and it's generally a way to give undead creatures and characters key. Uh, it works a bit differently, not in how you get it, but in what the abilities do. And it's generally a bit more expensive to get into, but has much more powerful abilities in general. Beyond that, though, I'm not going to talk too much about it until we get to the chapter about it. Again, martial knowledge. Talked about that the last one. Same thing here. It represents your knowledge of key and stuff, and martial things. Uh, a lot of this stuff is the same, but I am going to talk about a special rule set, the Unification of Key Points. If you want to make technicians and stuff very easy, then this is the rule set for you. What it does is it unifies all key pools and all accumulation pools into one big pool. So instead of having strength, dex, and power key and so on, you just have key and your accumulation. It all just adds together. And when you're using it, it's like all your key points are generic points, and all the points you need are generic points. It makes it a lot like casting spells of Xeon, and it makes it very simple. But it does make key users much more powerful because now they, for every high stat they have, a stat of 10 or higher, they suddenly get a lot more free accumulation, and those really cheap techniques become really easy to pull off. And you'll find that in using it, you'll prefer to go for more simple techniques that can capitalize better off of having a relatively low key cost relative to your accumulation, which will be much higher than normal. Beyond that, there are some rules uh, for charging key and holding key points, like giving you a range of how many key points you can just have at the ready before you start losing key, unless you're planning on using it. I talked about the colors of your aura for key as well, which is great for fluff and a great way as a player or DM to go and to give you some more information on someone if you use the erudition ability from the core rulebook to maybe learn more about the guy or about the fights or who you're just scanning. Key recovers faster in this book. It's 1 point per hour in each of your things. I believe it might actually no, I think that's the same. Never mind, I lied to you. I believe it's actually very similar. I remember taking like much longer recover key, multiple hours, but I might be crazy. I'm pretty sure it's actually the same, to be honest. Oh yeah, it's the same. It's easier. Forget that part. I didn't say anything. I also give some rules here for very low levels of key, where you basically lose fatigue points having 10 or less key, and at 0 you lose it really quickly. Nothing too important. It's very rare that you'll get to that point, and if you do, you probably either just won the fight by pulling off a cool technique, or lost it because you fucked up, Next, we're going into the advanced combat rules. To be honest, I ignore most of these rules because they require a lot of memory on the DM and player side, and a lot of extra bullshit to actually remember. A good example of this is an excessive imbalance in attributes, where if you fight someone who just has way better stats than you, they get bonuses against you, basically. But the differences have to be huge. Like you need to have like at least. It looks like just because I'm not, like I said, these rules I use the least, so I'm like reading the text as I go. But basically, after you have a total of 7 or more of a stat than somebody, uh, so specifically for dexterity agility. So if your total dexterity agility is 7 or higher than their total dexterity and agility, you start getting bonuses against them. And these bonuses get higher for every point beyond 7 you go. So at 7 it's plus 10, then at 8 it's plus 20, then 30, then 40, and so on. Sorry about that. I'm still recovering a bit from a cold, but this is I don't use this rule ever because it requires a lot of crap to go through, and generally these rules would only apply against characters with low agility and dexterity. And if you're a melee fighter, those stats of yours aren't low. They're probably your highest stats. Maybe not agility. People might have low agility if it's a melee fighter, but definitely your dexterity is going to be up there. And if you're a wizard who might have lowered agility and maybe lower dexterity, well, these rules don't apply to them putting up their magical projection or psychic projection anyway. So for the enemies that they would matter against, they don't matter at all. And the only thing these rules do is punish incredibly weak characters or allow your player characters to get extra bonuses against like enemies they'd basically stomp anyway. So I feel the rules are redundant and they don't need to be there. I suppose one use of them, though, however, would be like if you were a character who could debuff stats, and if you debuffed your enemy stats, then all of a sudden these rules are more interesting. Uh, blindness and area attacks. It's basically just saying if you're blind and you know where someone is, uh, specifically with using an area attack, their vague area, then you don't get the blind penalty if your area attack would completely eclipse the area that they're in, and there's no way you would miss them by being blind, basically. Pretty obvious stuff. And then these are examples of how you could find the location of someone to locate someone while blind, like using key, like key erudition or detection, as ways to locate someone. Or other spells that can detect a movement or people would also help you negate the blindness penalties. Stuff that you would probably already use. This is the usual situational modifiers, but these are some combined penalties for that you might be used to. So blind and fully immobilized, it just does some math for you, basically. Not important. This table is very important. It should have been in the core rulebook because it has to do with impacts. Impacts or slam, if you've read the Dominus Exxet book, this is how you determine how far someone flies when they're hit by an impact attack. It's a very simple system. This part of the table up here is how strong the impact is based on the skill you're using from 6 to 20. And then this is how far you fly, the numbers here, based on how much you fail the roll by. And then there's these G's. G is level of severity. And there's some fluff stuff in here telling you, like, mostly fluff, but eventually at about fourth level severity, suddenly uh, you automatically suffer critical hits and stuff. But what that's most there for is to tell you how much damage those impacts just do on top of the normal damage of the attack. So at first, the impact doesn't actually give you very much bonus, and there's a lot of wiggle room here. A good way to use these charts when it's like 10 to 50, like 5 to 10 is pretty simple. 5 for all the G1s, except for like maybe this one over here and this one over here where it's 10 all of a sudden because of the higher end of it. But this is just so that if this is the low end of the impact, it should do this. If it's the high end, do that. And then wiggle room in the middle based on if it's in the middle. Very simple. There are also rules for earthquakes or similar things where you would make an agility check to avoid being earthquake. And basically, if you have 16 strength or higher, you can make earthquakes. And these are how your earthquakes would work. And it just lets if you have a high strength character or someone who invests heavily into feature strength and then uses the core exit rules to have feature strength do something, suddenly you can now make earthquakes, which is cool. I haven't had a chance to actually use these mechanics yet, but I like the idea behind them because it's cool. It's a cool idea, like lore wise, for like a huge monster to come down, and every step they take, they make a huge earthquake when they really put their weight behind it. But it basically allows you to cast the earthquake spell from the Earth Path of Magic, more or less, once you get up there in strength. And these are some of my favorite fluff rules as well, right here. What happens when people are around you when you're fighting, when you're really powerful? So these levels are your combined attack ability between you and your opponent. And basically, the higher it gets, the more collateral damage you cause around you. So eventually, when you're fighting each other, you're basically going to be like killing every bystander around you and destroying buildings and stuff. So it makes fighting in like a not rural, an urban environment very dangerous because now you might be like causing a lot of damage and not even realize it. I like these rules for campaigns that are very high magic, and they are very fun for that. For low magic stuff, though, I'd recommend ignoring these rules, though, obviously, because it would be ridiculous if you guys are all like just normal guys with long swords and like you're cutting through trees and shit, even though you're normal dudes, basically. What's this one? I'm not familiar with this rule right away. Oh, I see, I see. So this is just saying if you ignore AT in an attack, you deal more damage with when you're hitting a supernatural shield. It's not. It's so small and minuscule though. It's not too important. It's nice though for helping to chip down those like big shields. But it's something easier. It's like every AT you ignore, you deal 10 more damage. This is them trying to make perception a more useful stats. Prior, having points in perception is useless, but now I like this that it gives perception special abilities. Like at 13, you're immune to like environmental luminosity, so all of a sudden you can't be blinded and stuff from like lights. And you can then sense stuff, or you have radial perception where you can see everything. I like it. Uh, Multiple missiles is the opposite of what rate of fire normally does. Where instead of making a lot of individual attacks, you're making one big attack with a weapon. Uh, these I'm not a big fan of this because you'd rather just make multiple attacks than deal a bit more damage. The defensive fan is something nice to use to help you reduce some negatives from blocking projectiles. Again, these rules I don't use very much. Anticipate Surprise is only useful if you're a very slow character who will be surprised all the time. Uh, and then these are other special maneuvers you can pull off if you have Inhuman and you have reached mastery in attack or defense. These are all cool. They're a nice thing to keep track of as a player. As a DM, though, you're probably going to forget about them because they're not too important. Finally, we get the key. The first big change to key is now takes time to learn it. So you have a knowledge level based on how much martial knowledge you have. So if you have less than 50, you can't even start on learning key in theory. Sorry about that. That's not completely true. Having a teacher can increase your tier of learning, as well as other learning materials might help you. Also, if you're doing a high level campaign, not high level, I mean a high supernatural level, you might even bump up the learning level as well. But basically, these basically help you figure out how long it would take to learn a technique or an ability. Uh, Having a teacher speeds it up. If you have a teacher who is so okay, yes, it's the same as martial arts. There's also learning martial arts just below this, by the way. So On your own, you just use your martial knowledge, and this is how long it would take on this chart. So 1 MK per month. That means that's how much MK you're investing in the thing you're learning. So if it costs 40 MK, it'll take you 40 months to learn it, which means it's going to take you a very long time to learn it. Now, if you had a teacher who was also considered a master for you, suddenly it's 1 MK per week. That's 40 weeks. And if, for example, this was like a very high level campaign, suddenly you can learn it 40 per day, and it ramps up from there. Characters who focus on key and have lots of martial knowledge will learn techniques fast, whereas characters who just dabble in it will learn it very slowly. It's nice. It's a good way to make it so being a technician and stuff is a lot more valuable beyond just having more martial knowledge. Now that extra martial knowledge you have is a lot more useful. The same applies just like for martial arts. However, it's a bit more simple. It's based not off your martial knowledge, but your attack ability. Attack and defense ability combined. Uh, like a with a in this system with a master, and by the way, a master is someone who not only knows your martial art that you're learning is teaching you, or in the case of, sorry, I skipped something. Uh, Basically, with this martial knowledge system, a master just needs 250 more martial knowledge points than you, more or less. He needs to be like, if you're level 1, he needs to be on the 3rd or 4th degree to be a master for you. Eventually, you'll get so good that there's no one who can be a master for you, but you can still have an instructor. Instructors, uh, with martial knowledge and learning that and learning key techniques, increase it by 1 tier, and if they're a master, it's 2 tiers. With martial arts, it's very similar, except using your attack and defense ability. The only difference, though, is that an instructor is someone who knows the martial arts that you're trying to learn. A master knows at the advanced or supreme degree, as long as you're not learning the degree he is at or doesn't know, obviously. A master will increase your tier by 1, and you need an instructor to even learn martial arts. You cannot learn it by yourself. Uh, Unless you have some sort of like study material, obviously, to learn from that, you need something to learn martial arts, whether it's a master or instructor or study material. If it's just yourself, then you're gonna be going at it like this, using this chart, attack ability plus defense ability, and it will take you X amount of time based on the complexity of the martial art. If you have a master, it will take it will not take as long. Very simple. These are the advantages. There's not very many. They're all very normal. And these are all the usual key abilities. There are some new ones and upgrades to ones as well. They're very simple though. I'm just telling you they exist. I'm not going to go over them though. I'm going to skip past all this normal stuff, and I'm going to go right to Nemesis. So Nemesis can only be acquired through basically uh with the GM's permission, basically. Anyone can learn Nemesis as well as Master Key as well. You can do both if you really want to. And even make techniques, if you are going the Nemesis route, still requires you to get key control and use of key. But the power of Nemesis, the abilities it grants, are very powerful. Very powerful indeed. Like there's Armor Emptiness, which allows you to just reduce the damage of a weapon, which is nice, even with a little bit. You can upgrade it, and then the big things on it are key cancellation, magic cancellation, and I believe there's matrix cancellation as well, and the greater versions of all of them. And what this does is it breaks your game. So, how does it break the game? So, if you're fighting a key user, it's not so bad. It's pretty bad, but it's not so bad. If you're like an actual technician, you might be able to still use the key technique eventually. Keyword eventually. So based on the value of the accumulations that you're trying to counteract, so 1 to 8, 9 to 12 on this little chart, it reduces all those accumulations by what the chart says, which means you're charging up slower or not at all, depending on how it works. Let me just double check this. Yes. So, and it's not based on your enemy's accumulations, mind you. It's based on your accumulations. So once your total accumulation hits 28, suddenly you're reducing everyone around you's accumulations by 6 or 7. That's really good, obviously. That's them not being able to use key. But you know what? On the low end, key cancellation isn't that overpowered, to be honest. It's magic cancellation that is very powerful. So if you get this early or at any point, it doesn't matter really what point on the chart you get here. If your opponent attempts to cast a spell at the base degree, which in the magic book that's how they do it, or any spell and doesn't have added effects in the core rulebook, if the Zionic cost of the spell becomes less than the base cost, the spell fizzles. It does nothing. So suddenly, if this guy doesn't know how much Xeon you're sapping from his spell, which could be up to 140 by the way, all of a sudden your wizard can't cast spells. His shield doesn't go up anymore. His magic beams don't fire off. He is dead in the water. And finally, if you were hoping that being a mentalist would save you, no. Mentalists get the best deal out of it because they get to cheat a bit by using by all their advantages and mental patterns, giving them the ability to get more free successes on their ability. So they don't get completely shut down, but once you get up there, it makes it way more often for your opponent to suddenly lose a bunch of fatigue points for failing their matrices that normally succeed every time. And finally, this one is also brutal. Binding cancellation. There is no greater version of it, but if there was, it'd be gross. So already summoning is very dangerous. One misstep could cause you to die, like instantly die. So if you're fighting someone that gives you a huge penalty on summoning, and now you're having to roll your summon, bind, control, banish at a huge penalty, you're suddenly at a big risk of killing your own character. And this shuts down summoners. These abilities are the main reason why Nemesis is overpowered. And if you want to allow the use of Nemesis, I'd recommend tweaking the power of these abilities. Or simply not allowing the cancellation abilities. Because the other powers are still good, they're just not busted good, if you get what I mean. The rest of the powers, I don't need to go over, to be honest. They're pretty normal. They're all pretty good. And they allow some cool abilities. I like everything but the cancellation techniques. The cancellation stuff is mad broken. And you'll find that if you allow a character to use them, any supernatural foe will be at a huge, huge disadvantage. However, this does mean the best character to fight a Nemesis user is in fact a weapon master, because he receives no negatives from any of these things. Due to his lack of any skill, he is the most skilled fighter. So, next are these new common modules. They're all pretty cool, for the most part. There's one for throwing shit tons of missiles. There is one for using your offhand weapon as a shield, which basically, well, not as a shield, it lets you block 2 attacks without taking the multiple attacks penalty. And it doesn't, and what you can do is instead of the extra attack, you trade it to get an extra defense. I like it. Increased critical is the most boring of these, but uh, it's nice if you want to go for a character based around criticals and like disarm and like for knocking guys out or instantly killing enemies. It's nice to have. Uh, Unusual attacks is cool and lets you use those secondary damage types on your weapons without any penalties. That's really cool. Unusual traps is useless. It lets you trap enemies without a trapping weapon, but it's at a much bigger penalty, and it also makes it harder to trap them. Not so good. Bodyguard is really cool. It reduces the penalty to try to cover or push aside a person next to you. Uh, it doesn't help people with supernatural shields, but if you want to push someone aside your dodge skill or interpose yourself with the block skill, it reduces the penalty of doing that to -10, which is nice. Uh, Movement in confined spaces is a bit too situational for me to ever recommend. It's nice, but it gets rid of like a -20 penalty that you might get like very rarely. Dodging with a shield is really good. I like it. It lets you go sword and board and still use dodge, and suddenly makes a dodging character that wants to go for counterattacks a lot more viable instead of forcing you to go into the block route. So firm grip is only really there if your DM is an asshole and he is big on disarming you. I wouldn't take it unless your DM is big on disarming you. It depends on his style and the kind of things he likes going for, really. Next are the limits. Limits are cool. Very, very cool. You get to buy one. There is some bullshit about needing to trigger 10 or greater to do the limit. But ignore that. So they each have an MK cost, and you pick one based on what you like. And what they do is based on a certain action or reaction to something happening to you, you get key points back. So that could be simply being in combat, killing dudes, protecting someone. I'm not going to go over all of them, but all of them are good. Some are better than others, but they're all good. I'd recommend if you want to be a key user, I'd recommend taking one. Even if it's just like the limit of war up here that gives you 1 key point per round and will give you 80 key points per day. You know, it's very nice. If you are using normal key rules, you do have to pick which key point you're getting as you get them, but they're especially powerful with unification of key points because then you're just getting key and you don't need to worry about what kind of key it is or strategize around that. Cool, we're getting to martial arts. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the costs of martial arts have changed. Tau get the 50% discount, and you use this chart now in the book. They come in degrees, and you can still combine them as per usual. All that stuff is the same. The limitations are the same, and all this is the same. The difference, however, is martial arts have a complexity, which is important for learning them, and they have up to 3 degrees. Well, basic ones do. The base degree, advanced degree, and supreme degree. Each tier of degree has its own requirements, usually of attack and defense, and a secondary ability, maybe some key, and they will grant you bonuses. I believe most core rulebook martial arts are at the advanced degree, so the supreme degree is generally an upgrade on the old martial art, but it is more difficult to get. As per usual, you buy these if you want martial arts, or maybe pick up the base degree if you're a fighter and want an option if you get disarmed because your DM hates you, or because you like to be prepared, because maybe you're going somewhere where you cannot get a weapon and you must use your fists. But yeah, there are a few new martial arts in the book too, but I'm not going over the nitty gritty of them. Just know they exist and they have 3 degrees. You have to go in order. You can't skip from base to advanced. You have to get base, advanced, and supreme. Eventually, as you learn a few of these martial arts, you can eventually go and get an advanced martial arts. They work just like before. They have really hard requirements and they're very powerful. They generally don't increase the damage, but what they do is they give you very cool abilities. Uh, I don't think there are any. Sorry, there is a few new ones. I don't know that there wasn't, but there definitely is, and the newer ones are pretty insane. Like, let me find one in particular that one of my players is always talking about. Here it is, Rex Frame, which literally gives you natural armor and damage barrier. The damage barrier isn't at first isn't like amazing, 60 whatever, but increases to 200, which basically means if you're fighting any normal person, you're invincible, which is nice. Also, there's the God Hand. If you want to go that route, you know. But yeah, martial arts is the same. A big difference though is now there are rules for using weapons. Uh, Certain martial arts can use certain weapons. Yay, that's awesome, right? Downside is you don't get the You basically trade the damage of the martial art for the weapon, and you only get the special ability of the martial art as long it's. Here, let me read it out to you. Yeah, sorry. They can apply the unarmed bonuses to attack and defense the martials provide, just as you do in fighting unarmed. So only from the bonus and master bonus sections you get. You don't get the special abilities. You suddenly lose them. So if you're a Taekwondo guy, you can't kick anymore. I think this is dumb. If you want to use these, I'd recommend convincing your DM to let you have all the powers of your martial art while using the weapon. Because you're spending your DP and basically you get jack and shit. Because those attack and defense bonuses are nice early on, but once you're getting up there, suddenly you realize you wasted like 40 DP and you're very sad. Because those bonuses do not stack beyond the class bonuses, so they can only go as high as 50. But finally, we're here. In Key, the section you probably came here for. The big section. The basics are all the same. But there are some cool new things you can do. So as before, you can maintain techniques but make them cost more. But there is a few more things you can do. A new kind of maintenance called a sustained technique. They come in minor and greater sustained techniques. Minor sustained techniques last 5 turns, and greater ones last 20 turns. And I'm just going to scroll down real quick to a technique ability so you can see what that means for the cost in the chart. So it's more efficient to have a minor or greater sustained on a technique, because overall it will cost you less key to pay for that than it would for that many turns of maintenance. So that means if you want a technique to last whole fight, you pick one of these two. Now there is some limitations. Minor and greater sustenance can only be applied to level 2 and level 3 techniques, and they make them much more expensive, as you can see from this chart. But if you want a technique to last the whole fight, once you pull it off, that's how you do it. So you can also improv techniques as well. Uh, it's a bit it's a bit of a weird thing. You need the key ability improvise techniques, and it lets you basically pull out key techniques from your ass by making them on the spot. It's cool. I like it. I think it's a very flavorful thing to add to the game, but it's not something most players would use. But I could see a cool character being made from it. Uh, you can also get combinable effects as well, where you basically can use 2 key techniques at the same time by paying a little bit extra key and martial knowledge to both techniques. So you use technique A and technique B goes off at the same time, basically. Very, very simple. Now, as before, there are a crap load of abilities, and there's even a bunch of new ones. I will not be going over all of these at all, or very many of them, to be honest, because there's a lot of repeats. And you should honestly look through it, and look at the names, and pick the ones that sound the coolest to you. And make techniques that are flavorful for your character. Uh, there are some new ones, though, like key absorption. In this book, there's also the ability now to have with actually your physical key weapons, to not only be a melee weapon, but also for projectile weapons and dual wielding weapons as well, finally. So now you can dual wield, quad wield, or whatever. Uh, Key absorption is cool. It's a good way to absorb a key technique and nullify it instead of just trying to block it. Beyond that, it's very similar. There are big shields you can make now and stuff, and yeah, it's a lot of the same, but it's a bit more fleshed out, and there's some cool stuff that you can do as well. Like there is energy impacts, where you can do a line of destruction now instead of just an area attack if you want to go for a line. Here are those impacts you mentioned earlier if you want to send someone flying. You can brand people now, they get bonuses. Like there's a lot of stuff. There are also more disadvantages if you really want to reduce the cost of those techniques and other cool stuff. Also, plenty of waifus as well in this book. I'd recommend getting your hands on it. It's pretty good. And this guy's killing himself to do his ultimate technique. Cool. So these are advantages, but they are special advantages. So I'm going to point them out in particular. They're the legacies of blood. Sorry, the legacies of blood. Let's not speak at 20 million miles per hour now, shall we? These are very great advantages if you want to make a very thematic character. Uh, Most of them are pretty average to below average, but some of them are broken. The Eyes of Death is one of them because it turns all of your attacks into critical hits. Yeah, all of them. Yeah, yeah, every single one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Automatic critical. Unless you're a GR creature, then you're fine. But if you're a normal person, then you're not. There's also some other cool abilities that you can use with them as well. But mostly you get free crits and kill everything. There's some moon shit over here. There's a bit of lore in here as well for like the Great Beast and stuff. The Eyes of Destiny seems good, but unless you're gonna stalk someone for a while, they're not that great. You know. Or if you really don't know what you want, you can scroll all the way to the bottom and have Latent Blood, which is the coolest because you can with that one you can trade your characteristic bonus for a bloodline instead. Next, though, is something far more interesting: the Ars Magnus or butt magic. And I feel I kind of wish these weren't MK costed things, to be honest, and were treated more like weapon modules, so that weapon masters get a discount on them. Because I feel like this could have been cool mechanics to give the weapon master. Because right now the weapon master is he's like the D&D fighter of Anima, right? He doesn't do much besides smash. But to be honest, these things are pretty cheap on the low end. So even a weapon master can get quite a few of these and become very powerful. These can give your characters much more defined, like I'm gonna call them class features, uh, allowing you to basically do whatever you want, regards to what cool shit you're doing. Some have other requirements, like other weapon modules, for example, or special abilities, but they're all very cool. I'd recommend checking them out as well. There are also major butt magics as well, which are more difficult to get, but they give you much more potent abilities. It's basically another way to get supernatural abilities as a key user or anyone else without actually going deep into key. And instead allowing you to have more defined abilities that let you flesh out your character or go for a very specific niche. They're all very amazing. And they're all more or less well enough explained in the confines of the text that I don't need to go too deep into them. And the more complicated ones do have a bunch of tables to obviously confuse you. Uh, if there is one that I would point out in particular that I would warn you against is, let me find it really quickly. It's like near the bottom. The Seals of the Dragon. So this one sounds the coolest. If you ever watched Naruto or a similar anime, you're opening the inner gates of your body to unlock the ultimate power inside. But unlike in Naruto, where Broccoli survives, you don't usually. You just die. Uh, they're cool, and if you want a cool like transformation sequence that does give you benefits as you open the gates, this can be really cool. I wouldn't recommend getting all the gates, but I would recommend, it'd be cool to get a few as like a transformation if you want to go for that character. And if you don't like the theme of that, there are these other transformations above here. Physical Power, Rupture of Destiny, Eidolon. They're all pretty cool. Sorry. And they allow you a more obvious way to transform. My honest favorite addition to the book are the Impossible Weapons. These are special key-based weapons that allow you to break the rules of a weapon and use it in a unique way. Like the Weapon Swarm, for example, where you just hide a bunch of chain weapons in your clothing and stuff, and this like send amount of people. These weapons are anime as fuck. If you like Soul Calibur and shit, this is the stuff you look at. They're pretty cheap to buy when it comes to their DP and MK cost, but they do have some requirements. And it gives you wacky stuff, like the ability to throw great swords as, or like huge maces as like fucking boomerangs. If you want to use like a marionette as a weapon, like again, like Naruto, there's now mechanics for making that kind of like creature, which is cool. I think that's one of the better ones. You can use monofilament weapons now if you want to cut people up with monofilament, uh, which is awesome. Some of them have upgraded forms like Cancer Magister and Cancer Normal. Uh, there are some guns in here if you really want some guns, like the Leo Mace Cannon, which is a mace and a cannon combined together, which is fucking awesome. Like, these are awesome. Uh, some of them are a bit weird, like Virgo, but I think that's cool. And they give you ideas for instruments to augment it in what it does. Uh, if there was one I'd say could have been cooler, also Whip Sword, thank God we have that now, is I would be careful with the cape weapon in particular. It's kind of it's really good, but you want to be careful as a DM to what you want to consider a cape or not, depending on what kind of level of fantasy. One that you might want to consider restricting because it's very powerful is Capricorn. It allows you to crit very often, and these crits, although don't produce amputations or permanently injure people, uh, it lets you throw needles at people basically and turn off their limbs temporarily. Which, if you're okay with that kind of level of power, is fine. There's also another one for throwing stuff that lets you go all in on the throwing shit and turning them into scariness. Also, if you like Terraria, you can use a yo-yo now, so you can be a yo-yo warrior and just kill people. And finally, there is the one where you have loads of swords. This is my least favorite thing in the book because I think it's completely unnecessary. But if you're big into like again, this book was made for people who would really want to make characters from shows like Naruto, I believe, because when I first read the Seal Invocation, that's the first thing I thought. Seal's Invocation are you have elemental seals of air, water, fire, metal, and earth. These seals are purchased using martial knowledge. You spend 30 to buy a minor seal and 60 to buy the greater seal of it. And then you can use these seals to summon creatures like a summoner would. Uh, you do this by making an invocation check. And the invocation check is very easy to pass, basically. You roll a D100, and for every level the creature is above you, you must roll a 10 or higher. So if he's the same level than you or lower, you just can do it, as long as you have the proper sealed invocation. If you fail, bad things happen, but it's nowhere near as bad as a normal summoner. Worst case scenario, you fall unconscious and lose all your key points, which come back at 1 an hour, so whoop-de-doo. To use a seal, though, it does cost key. 5 for minor seals, 15 for greater ones when you activate them. So, cool. But that's not all. It's not like a summoner. The one difference that I'm happy is there is you do not control the creature. You cannot control it. Instead, when you summon a creature, like in the show Naruto, you must initiate in what is called a blood pact. This is a deal you make with the creature. Now, obviously, depending on the creature, to get to the point where you make a deal might not be so cut and dry. You might need to beat it into submission, for example. You might need to convince it to be your friend. You might need to do it a service. There's a lot of ways to do it. That's the one thing I like about it is that it introduces a lot of role playing elements to summoning. Because you can't just cheat it out and summon control bind. You gotta summon it and make a deal. And then from that point onwards, once you have made a blood pact with the creature, you can then summon him and he will assist you or he will do whatever service is pertained in the blood pact. So you might make one with, for example, a uh, a lesser creature to help you with scouting and sort of stuff, or something more powerful to let you help you in battle. Some more powerful creatures who you make a pact with might not let you summon him, but might let you summon his like minions, for example, instead. Like a very powerful demon lord you make a deal with would probably let you summon his minions and not him. This is a list of a general idea of how to price out how many seals and what type of seal it takes to summon a certain kind of creature. This is good for custom monsters and such, and they have a few examples of creatures in the core rulebook, as well as some that don't exist at all in either book. But in the Those Who Walks Among Us book, the monster manual, in the back of the book near the index, there is a list of all the costs for the creatures in the book. Okay, some of these are in the web supplements. I've never actually checked it out yet. I will have to. Here is a compendium of custom-made techniques. They are exactly what I said. They are just custom-made techniques for you to just grab if you don't want to make your own. Fair warning, though, these techniques are not efficiently made. They have a lot of key blow and are generally overcosted because they were not made efficiently. They were made to be as thematic and cool as possible with the type of techniques they are, which is cool. I'm not against that. I think that's fine. But just so you're aware, you're not going to get the optimal super techniques. You're going to get the average techniques in this kind of list. And there are a lot of them to pick from, as you can see. Lots. We're going to skip past all of them, though, because they're not important. And we're finally at the end of the book. This part of the book, there are some new weapons and armor. I'm going to tell you right now, most of these weapons are not very interesting because they are inferior versions of weapons in the core rulebook. But that does not mean they are pointless. They are inferior because they don't do all the things you want them to do. However, some of them are pretty good. Not for the obvious reasons, but for going for a different kind of build and using a weapon that might be easier to get. Like this Bracamarne, for example, has high breakage on a sword, on a one-handed sword that isn't a sword breaker, which is nice. And with a minus 10 to speed and 60 damage, it's not that bad. But then you go look at the Claymore, where you get 5 more damage and 10 less speed, and it's like, nah, why the fuck would I use that? Now, it is two-handed, which is a benefit, but I feel like something like the Claymore is just inferior to other two-hand weapons that you can pick instead. Some of these are cool, though, like the Battle Cane, although is not good on its own. It's the perfect weapon if your character is like a noble from Gabriel and you want a weapon that is like incognito that you can just whip out and no one would think you're weird for walking around with it. So there are some great weapons here for role playing. Definitely. Most of these weapons are great for role playing, and some of these weapons are great for DMs who want to sorry about that. Who want their enemies to have weapons, but also at the same time, like weapons of a certain type. Like maybe if you want guys to train weapons, but you don't want them to have great swords, then you might give them a claymore so they have like a lesser great sword. If you want to go for that more of a mid-tier kind of enemy who's using an inferior weapon, that's what you go with. Uh, there is also new armor, and the new armor is a lot more interesting. There's some bows and stuff here too, but they're very standard. That's mostly Oriental stuff, to be honest. Like the armor is as well. More armor variety and more armor stat distributions are nice, and these armors are all very light to wear, which is good. It's always nice having more low armor requirement armors so that players who have low strength or don't invest in more armor at all have a bit more options that are attainable to get without expending too much development points. So I like the armors. Weapons, not so much. Armor's pretty good though. And finally, we're here. We made it to the index. So that's the Dominus Exxet book explained in some detail. I didn't go into full detail in topics that are how do I put it? In topics that don't normally come up. In fact, there's a lot of content in this book, and it would be possible for someone to go into a deep dive of basically every single chapter and go through the pros and cons of every weapon and technique in the book. But this is an overview, so I've given you a quick overview of the book to help you guide through it and know where things are. Maybe if there's some interest in like a actual proper deep dive in every single mechanic in this book, I might do it. But for now, I think an overview is a pretty good place to put the key topic finally on the shelf after finally getting around to recording it. And I hope this helps out anyone who is trying to get into Anima, because it's a daunting game to learn, but it's a pleasurable one to master once you've done so. If you like the video, do the usual crap. You know what it is. I don't got to repeat it. And feel free, if you have a question about anything in the book that I may have only just glossed over quickly, or I spoke too fast and you didn't understand it, leave a comment, ask me a question. I'll answer it right away. It doesn't matter if you send me the comment like 3 months from now, I'll answer it. But thank you again for watching. And next time, I'm going to look through my old videos. I can't remember all the topics I've gone through at the top of my head right now. But the next video will be another animal topic for sure. Uh, I don't believe I've covered summoning yet in full detail. So it will likely be summoning because I mentioned it a fair bit here. So it would be nice for me to give more context on how summoning works. And that's a much simpler topic, thank God. Thank you again, guys, and have a great day. Stop recording.